The future Queen of England is on her knees in front of a dying fire, desperately burning a secret life that is about to get her killed. The air in the bedroom is thick with the smell of scorched paper and cold sweat. Princess Sophia Dorothea isn't thinking about her crown or her massive fortune right now. She's thinking about the sound of boots. Heavy, rhythmic, and terrifying. The footsteps of her husband's private guard are echoing through the stone corridor, coming straight for her door. She is 28 years old, beautiful and trapped in a nightmare. She grabs another handful of letters, the only evidence that she ever dared to love someone who wasn't her husband, and shoves them into the flames. Outside that door, the man she married has finally decided to stop being a neglected husband and start being a monster. He isn't coming to argue. He's coming to erase her. To the men who ruled this world, a princess was just a gold mine with a pulse. Once they had the gold, the pulse was optional. You see, Sophia's life was a lie from the moment she hit puberty. Her father didn't see a daughter, he saw a bargaining chip. He sold her off to her cousin, a man named George, who would one day become the King of England. George was a man with a heart like a frozen pond. He didn't want a wife to talk to or a partner to share a life with. He wanted her money to fund his wars and her body to produce an heir. For years, Sophia lived in a palace that felt like a high-end coffin. While she sat in drafty rooms trying to be the perfect silent princess, George was out in the city with his mistresses, laughing at her. He treated her like a piece of furniture, something to be used and ignored. But Sophia had a secret. She wasn't as obedient as she looked. She had a fire in her that a cold man like George couldn't put out. She had been planning an escape. A midnight carriage, a bag of jewels, and a man who actually loved her waiting at the palace gates. She thought her royal title made her safe. She thought being the mother of the future king meant they couldn't touch her. She was dead wrong. The heavy oak door to her bedroom doesn't just open, it shatters. A group of soldiers in her husband's colors burst in. They don't bow, they don't call her Your Highness. They grab her by the arms, their fingers digging into her expensive silk sleeves like iron claws. As they drag her toward the darkness of the hallway, she screams for the one person who promised to save her.
As the guards haul her toward the stairs, Sophia's foot hits something soft on the floor. She looks down, and the scream dies in her throat. Laying on the rug is a single leather glove. It's soaked in fresh, dark blood. The blood of the man who was supposed to be her rescue. He didn't leave her. He's been butchered just a few feet from her door. She was the richest girl in the land, but on her wedding night, Princess Sophia Dorothea realized she hadn't been married. She'd been sold to a man who treated her worse than his hunting dogs. The nightmare didn't start with that bloody glove in the hallway. It started 12 years earlier, the day Sophia was told she had to marry her cousin, George. In those days, a princess didn't get to choose her husband. She was a human paycheck. Sophia's father was loaded, and George's family wanted that cash. When 16-year-old Sophia found out she was being forced to marry him, she screamed, cried, and threw his picture across the room. She knew, even then, that George was a cold, cruel man. But in the world of royalty, a girl's tears don't mean anything compared to a pile of gold. The wedding was like a funeral draped in white lace. George didn't look at her with love. He looked at her like a soldier inspecting a new horse. He was a man who hated small talk, hated music, and hated anyone he couldn't control. On their wedding night, there was no romance, only a cold, silent duty. He got what he wanted, her money and eventually 2 children to carry on his name. Once he had those, he was done with her. To the world, she was a lucky princess. Inside the palace walls, she was a bird in a cage made of gold and broken promises. Life in the palace was a slow, agonizing grind. Sophia was surrounded by people who wanted to see her fail. Her mother-in-law hated her and spent every day whispering about how Sophia wasn't royal enough. But the real sting was George's behavior. He didn't even try to hide the fact that he was sleeping with other women. He brought his mistresses right into the palace, women who openly mocked Sophia to her face. George was a functional monster. He didn't just ignore her, he tried to crush her spirit. During one of their many fights about his cheating, George's temper finally snapped. He didn't just yell, he lunged at her, his hands clamping around her throat, pinning the future Queen of England against a stone wall until she couldn't breathe. That was the moment Sophia realized her husband wouldn't just be the death of her happiness, he might actually be the death of her.
She spent her nights alone in her cold room, listening to the party downstairs she wasn't invited to. She was a mother who wasn't allowed to hold her own kids, and a wife who was treated like a prisoner. She was waiting for a spark, any reason to keep living. That spark arrived in the form of a man from her past. A handsome, reckless soldier named Count Philip von Königsmarck walked into the throne room, and for the first time in a decade, Sophia didn't see a guard or an enemy. She saw a way out. But in this palace, a way out usually leads straight to a grave. One secret look across a crowded ballroom was all it took for the princess to risk the executioner's axe for a taste of the love her husband denied her. When Count Philip von Königsmarck swaggered into the palace, he looked like everything the prince was not. He was tall, athletic, and had a smile that promised trouble. More importantly, he and Sophia had been childhood playmates. Back then, they were just kids playing in the gardens. Now, they were two lonely souls trapped in a den of wolves. The prince, Sophia's husband, didn't notice the way his wife's eyes lit up. He was too busy drinking and ignoring her to care. But the rest of the court? They were like hawks watching for the slightest stumble. In this palace, a princess having a friend was a scandal. A princess having a lover was a death warrant. When you're starving for affection, even a poisonous crumb looks like a feast. Sophia knew the risks, but for the first time in 10 years, she felt alive. It started with small things: a whispered word behind a silk fan, a letter hidden in a bouquet of flowers. Soon, it turned into a full-blown, feverish obsession. Over the next 2 years, Sophia and Philip wrote over 300 secret letters to each other. These weren't just "I miss you" notes. They were raw, emotional, and dangerous. In them, Sophia called her husband a monster, and Philip promised to carry her away to a life where she could finally breathe. But you can't keep a fire that hot secret for long. The palace was crawling with spies. Every maid, every guard, and every mistress was on the prince's payroll. One woman in particular, a bitter mistress of the prince who had been rejected by Philip, made it her life's mission to destroy the princess. She began intercepting the letters, reading the dirty secrets of a future queen, and saving them like a collection of knives to be used later. Sophia and Philip grew reckless. They started meeting in the dead of night, Philip climbing through palace windows just to hold her for an hour. They were playing a game of Russian roulette with the most powerful family in the country. Sophia was convinced that her husband's guards were too stupid to catch them. She was wrong. They weren't stupid. They were just waiting for the perfect moment to strike, so she could never deny it. On a sweltering July night, Philip sent a final note. "The carriage is ready. Tonight we fly." But as Sophia waited by her window, her heart hammering against her ribs, she didn't hear a carriage. She heard a muffled scream from the hallway and the sound of something heavy, like a body, being dragged across the stone floor. The princess stood behind her locked door, heart racing, waiting for her lover's knock. But outside in the hall, the prince's assassins were busy cleaning his blood off their swords. While Sophia was packing her jewels and dreaming of freedom, the man she loved was walking into a slaughterhouse. Philip had crept through the palace, moving like a ghost toward Sophia's room for their final escape. He thought he was being sneaky. He didn't realize that the prince's spies had been reading his mail for months. They knew exactly where he would be, and they were waiting in the dark. 4 heavy-set guards, acting on the prince's direct orders, jumped him in the shadows of the hallway. Philip was a soldier, a fighter, but he didn't stand a chance. It wasn't a fair fight, it was an execution. They hacked at him with swords until he stopped screaming, right outside the very room where Sophia was waiting for him to save her. In this palace, secrets didn't stay buried, but people did. If you went against the prince, you didn't just die, you disappeared. Now here is the really sick part. The prince didn't want a public trial. A trial would mean the whole world would know his wife had cheated on him, and his ego couldn't handle that. So he made Philip vanish. Legend says the guards didn't even take the body out of the palace. They pried up the heavy stone floorboards under the fireplace,
shoved the mangled remains of the count underneath, and poured quicklime over him to eat away the bones. The next morning, the palace was eerily quiet. Sophia was frantic. She asked everyone where Philip was, but every servant gave her the same blank, terrifying stare. The count? We haven't seen him, Your Highness. It was like he had never existed. It's the ultimate form of psychological torture, knowing someone is dead, but having everyone look you in the eye and call you a liar.
Then her husband, Prince George, walked into her room. He didn't look angry, he looked bored. He sat down, adjusted his expensive lace cuffs, and told her that if she ever mentioned Philip's name again, she'd find out exactly what happened to him. He didn't have to say he'd killed him. The cold, dead look in his eyes said it all. Sophia was trapped. Her lover was gone, her letters were in her husband's hands, and the walls of the palace were literally closing in on her. She realized she wasn't a princess anymore. She was a witness to a murder, and her husband was the killer. Just when Sophia thought she could at least mourn in private, the prince dropped the final bombshell. He wasn't just going to keep her prisoner in the palace. He had signed a paper that would strip her of her name, her money, and her kids forever. But as the guards moved in to grab her, Sophia did something no one expected. She didn't beg. She spat directly in her husband's face. To get rid of his wife without a messy public scandal, the prince didn't just divorce her. He staged a fake trial to prove she was insane so he could steal her children and her fortune. After Sophia spat in the prince's face, the gloves were completely off. George didn't just want her gone, he wanted her destroyed. But there was a problem. If he accused her of adultery, the whole world would hear the juicy details of her affair and laugh at him for being a cuckold. He needed a cleaner way to get rid of the woman he hated. So the prince and his lawyers came up with a legal trap. They didn't charge her with having a lover. Instead, they accused her of malicious desertion, basically saying she was a bad wife who wanted to leave her husband. It was a total setup. They held a secret trial where Sophia wasn't even allowed to speak for herself. In a court run by men, a woman's truth is just a noise they choose to ignore. They didn't want justice, they wanted a vacancy on the throne. The most heartbreaking part of this trial wasn't the loss of her titles, it was the loss of her babies. Sophia had a son and a daughter. During the trial, the prince's guards physically ripped the children away from her. She was told that if she didn't sign the divorce papers, she would never see them again. Even worse, they told the children that their mother was a bad woman who had abandoned them because she didn't love them. The prince's family spent weeks gaslighting the public, telling everyone that the princess had suffered a mental breakdown. They painted her as a loose cannon, a woman who had lost her mind and needed to be hidden away for her own safety. It's the oldest trick in the book. When a woman becomes a problem, just tell everyone she's crazy. Sophia was officially erased. The court declared her marriage void, but they didn't set her free. Because she knew too much about the blood under the floorboards, she couldn't be allowed to go back to her parents or run away. She was a liability with a crown. As the trial ended, a black carriage with no royal markings pulled up to the palace gates. Sophia was forced inside, her hands shaking as she looked back at the nursery windows one last time. She thought she was being driven to a convent, but as the carriage headed deep into the dark woods toward a crumbling, isolated fortress, she realized the truth. She wasn't going to a school or a church. She was going to a hole in the ground where the world would forget her name. While her husband was crowned King of England and lived in a world of gold and parties, Sophia Dorothea was trapped in a crumbling castle, pacing the same stone floor for 32 years. The carriage stopped at a place called Alden. It wasn't a palace, it was a fortress surrounded by a murky moat and thick, suffocating walls. The guards led Sophia inside, the heavy iron gates clanging shut behind her with a sound like a guillotine. She was told the rules immediately. She could never leave the grounds. She could never see her children. She was dead to the world, even though her heart was still beating. For the next 3 decades, this was her life. While the rest of the world moved on, Sophia became a ghost. She spent her days walking the ramparts of the castle, staring out at the road, hoping to see a carriage that never came. She wasn't allowed to have visitors. She wasn't allowed to send letters that weren't read and censored by her husband's spies first.
He didn't just want her gone. He wanted her to rot in silence while he took everything that was hers. He wore her crown, while she wore the same gray stone walls.
The ultimate insult came years later. Her husband, the man who had murdered her lover and stolen her life, was invited to become the King of Great Britain. He moved to London and lived in luxury, surrounded by bowing servants and sparkling diamonds. Technically, Sophia should have been his queen. She should have been sitting on a throne in Westminster Abbey. Instead, she was eating dinner alone in a drafty room, listening to the wind howl through the moat. But Sophia was tougher than George expected. He thought she would die of a broken heart in a year or two. Instead, she lived on out of pure spite. She outlived the mother-in-law who hated her. She outlived the mistresses who mocked her. She spent 32 years refusing to apologize, refusing to act crazy, and refusing to let him win. She grew old in that castle, her dark hair turning white, her only company the guards who were paid to watch her die. But she never stopped writing letters to her children, even though she knew they would never reach them. She wanted them to know the truth, that their mother didn't leave them because she wanted to. She was taken. In 1726, after 32 years in a cage, Sophia felt the end coming. But she had one last move to play. On her deathbed, she called for a pen and paper. She didn't write a prayer, and she didn't write a will. She wrote a letter to the King of England, a message so terrifying it was said to have killed him from across the ocean. They tried to scrub her name from the palace walls and bury her memory under the floorboards, but the woman they called a sinner ended up having the last laugh from beyond the grave. The letter Sophia wrote on her deathbed wasn't a plea for mercy. It was a curse. She summoned all her strength to write to her husband, King George, one last time. She told him that they would meet again very soon, at the tribunal of God, where he would finally have to answer for the blood on his hands and the 32 years he stole from her. She died shortly after, alone in her cold castle. But the drama didn't end with her heartbeat. When the king received her letter while traveling in his carriage, it said he turned pale as a ghost. He was so shaken by her final words that he suffered a massive stroke and died just a few months later. Even in death, Sophia Dorothea was done taking his orders.
A king can burn letters and lock doors, but he can't stop the truth from bleeding through the pages of history. The prince tried so hard to delete her. He forbid anyone in the British royal family from ever mentioning her name. He destroyed her portraits. He wanted the world to think he had simply appeared on the throne without a wife. But here is the plot twist that George never saw coming. You can't kill a mother's bloodline. Every single British royal you know today, from Queen Victoria to the current king, is a direct descendant of the woman they locked in a cage. Her son became King George II, and her daughter became the Queen of Prussia. Her children didn't forget her. In fact, her son was so angry at how his father treated her that he spent his whole life hating the man. The moment George I died, his son went searching for the hidden portraits of his mother to bring her back into the light. Today, we don't look at Sophia Dorothea as a bad wife or a mad woman. We see her for what she really was, a woman who was sold into a nightmare and had the courage to try and find a little bit of love in a world of cold stone. She was a rebel who refused to be a silent victim. The palace where her lover was murdered is still standing. The castle where she was imprisoned still has the moat she stared at for 30 years. They tried to make her a footnote, but she became the heart of the story. She was the queen England never knew, the woman who lost her freedom but kept her soul.